Before the ships ever touched the edges of the shore, this land was already alive with thousands of years of memory woven into it, not empty, not waiting, but breathing with nations that understood the wind, the rivers, the forests, and the seasons as relatives rather than resources. People who built homes not just of wood and stone, but of language, ceremony, and shared responsibility. Where children learned who they were through stories spoken beside fires, and elders were honored as living libraries of wisdom. Where trade routes stretched like invisible threads across vast distances, connecting communities that would never meet in modern terms, but still knew each other through exchange and respect. And then, the horizon changed and ships appeared carrying people who saw the land differently, not as relationship, but as possession. And what followed did not happen all at once, but unfolded like a long unraveling. First through contact that brought curiosity and exchange, and then through something far heavier and more permanent as disease arrived without warning, moving through villages with a silence that no warrior training could stop, taking lives in waves so devastating that entire communities were left changed forever. Not because they had failed, but because their bodies had never known these illnesses before and had no defense against them. And in the emptiness that followed came pressure, then treaties written in unfamiliar language, agreements that often were not fully understood, but were misunderstood on purpose or by design. And land began to shift away piece by piece, not always through war at first, but through signatures, confusion, pressure, and then enforcement, until the places where ancestors were buried, where ceremonies had been performed for generations, were no longer accessible. And as time moved forward, conflict intensified, resistance grew, and so did the force used to break it, until entire nations were pushed from their homelands into forced journeys that stretched for hundreds of miles through cold, hunger, exhaustion, and grief. Journeys like the one now remembered as the Trail of Tears, where families walk not as travelers, but as people being removed from the world they knew, where children cried not only from fatigue, but from the confusion of seeing elders collapse on roads that were never meant to carry such suffering. And even after those removals, the pressure did not stop, because the next phase was not only about land, but about identity itself. And so children were taken from their families, sometimes by force, sometimes under threat, and brought into boarding schools where their names were stripped away and replaced, where the hair was cut as the first act of control, not just as appearance, but as a symbolic separating from identity and spirit, where speaking their own languages could bring punishment, where prayers learned from generations were forbidden, and where another religion was enforced, not through invitation, but through authority and fear. And in those places, many children grew up between worlds, unable to fully belong to either, carrying silence where the native words should have been, carrying confusion where certainty once lived, and the weight of that separation did not end when they left those schools, because they returned to families changed, sometimes unable to speak fully to their own parents anymore. And across generations, this created a wound that was not visible like a scar on skin, but lived inside memory, inside language loss, inside the quiet distance between people who should have been fully connected. Yet even through all of this, something never completely disappeared, because survival itself became an act of resistance. And in hidden spaces, languages were still whispered, ceremonies were still practiced away from the eyes of those who tried to erase them. The stories were still passed down, even when they had to be broken into fragments to avoid punishment. And over time, those fragments became seeds that later generations would gather and rebuild from, because while systems of colonization tried to replace identity with silence, they never fully succeeded in erasing memory itself. And today, what remains is both the weight of what was lost and the strength of what endured, a living truth that carries sadness, but also resilience. Because the story is not only about what was taken, but also about what refused to disappear. What survived inside people, even when everything around them tried to make them forget who they were. We are the voices they could not erase. Carried through sorrow, carried through pain, from stolen homes and forgotten names. We still remember who